story of the development of religion as we conventionally think of it today is the same, told in different ways depending on where it pops up in the earth. At some point in the past, people were naturally connected to spirit and were more intuitively aware of what they had the ability to draw from and how. Then they begin to fall out of this awareness. Various prophets or incarnations of spiritual beings arrived to help remind people of whom they are. And as the state of consciousness kept falling even despite their efforts, religion as we know of it and see it today began to rise. So the cycle is the same, and the same events occur in every cycle. And that cycle repeats itself and happens quicker and quicker and quicker. So let me say what I say again, but like better. Let me say that again, but better. Let me use an example. In Egyptian religion, and I like to use that example because that's one of the main ones that we think of, that it's actually the source of a lot of what we are talking about. So in Egyptian religion, we have an initial period of extremely high spiritual awareness, extremely high connectedness, without any effort. That is the natural state of society. That is the natural state of how we relate to each other. Now, in this time, the different color. I was trying to write the letter N. We have what are called the neters. So this is the hieroglyphically, I don't know what that would be. I should probably look it up. But anyway, the neters are what you would think of as the Egyptian gods. Now, over time, they became gods, quote unquote, to be worshipped. But in the beginning of the civilization that came to be known as Egypt, these things were understood to be spiritual principles that we all have the ability to interact with, and that exist as some of the foundational structure for creation, for reality. And neter is where you get the word nature. So when we're talking about the nature of a thing, that phrase, that's what neter is. So the essence of a thing as it exists, and how we interact with it, and what the role that it plays. And nature, that's where the word comes from. So spiritual principles that we interact with, that are part of us, that we create and are participating in the process of creating, eventually became the deities' objects of worship. And in that way, as spirituality descended, religion rose to attempt to fill the gap.
So you're saying that from these principles, people tried to capture the essence of the principle in a figure, in a physical
Yes.
entity.
And in doing that, is that how they lost their connectivity to the?
So they would have done that as a result of that already being in decline. But there's a feedback loop, because if you create, and part of what I want to say is the initial origin of the things that would be used in religion, like when you write a book or when you make a symbol or whatever, that's not a negative thing, because initially these things were done in the Egyptian context were to prevent people from forgetting where they come from. But as time and distance went on, now these things that are meant to remind you of what's in you, they are things to be worshipped, that you send your energy to.
So outside is to be worshipped outside of you.
Right. And that same process that we see in Egypt happens again and again and again over the course of time, more quickly. So we have spiritual principle descending into, quote, deity to be worshipped. And that same thing happens in every religion. Christianity, we have Yeshua talking about all these spiritual principles. Now it's something to be worshipped. Buddhism, same thing. Islam, same thing. Over the course of time, the same cycle repeats, and it happens quicker. So the reason it happens more quickly over time is because of the impact that it's having on humanity as a whole. So we are pretty globally interconnected now, and things happen super quick. The potential impact of a particular event or whatever on the collective awareness or consciousness is is much greater in terms of its ability to affect all of us at once than it was back then, although this is a microcosm of the same thing. That's why when Pastor Richard was talking about extinction, eventually if we don't realize who we are, we destroy ourselves. It happens on a per civilization basis in the past, or for various reasons. But because we're so interconnected now we are dealing with how this works on a global planetary scale. But it's the same principle. So the awakening that is taking place, and I know he's talking about extinction, but I don't think it's not going to happen. The awakening that's taking place in us, which is our reconnection to our own spiritual essence and our ability to draw from our own source, is what prevents extinction or self-destruction. It is the, as I said, decline of religious thinking and religions that are a product of religious thinking.
You are the only participant in the conference. Please press any key on your...
And a return to the awareness of the principles upon which our own interface with reality is based, which is spirituality, and what we have the ability to draw from our experience through spirituality. So, I talked about this last time I was here, actually. But two of these that are particularly important or relevant, because we were talking about natural law. These law with a capital W, capital L, to indicate it's the balance and harmony that you have the ability to perceive for yourself when you awaken to your own spiritual nature. It requires no set of instructions. You know, because you are a product of this reality. So natural law, the neter associated with natural law is ma'at. And that's from Egypt. And I mentioned this last time because she's the feminine quality of justice, which is why the blind lady with the scales is a lady. And that is the same principle religiousified in many ways and brought through Greece and Rome and, of course, here now.
Columbia, South Carolina, so we see them.
Columbia.
Columbia.
Columbia. The name Columbia is the name of this goddess, as it's translated and telephone gamed through Rome and Egypt, and Greece and stuff. Which is why we have the District of Columbia, and that's why all the Masons who invented this country this is what they were drawing on when they did it.
So they should
For various
there
reasons.
should be coming justice out of the District of Columbia.
Should be. And that's why I believe Columbia and the District of Columbia are connected, which is part of why I believe I'm in DC at all.
See you later.
All right, I'll see you. Okay, next time. But anyway, so Ma'at is the principle of harmony of balance, justice, which is balance, which is the feminine And her male counterpart is Tahuti. He is the Egyptian deity with the ibis head, with the bird head. Mm-hmm.
Oh.
The ibis bird is the, yeah. But anyway, my point is, these are two spiritual principles as they are represented as deities. So the religiousified version of these principles are the deities that are worshipped.
And what's the principle?
Oh, right. So Ma'at is harmony, justice, balance in the true spiritual sense of justice. And Tahuti is essentially the science or the practical application of the spiritual awareness of balance and justice.
Is that wisdom and understanding?
Wisdom and understanding. And Tahuti is the male counterpart. He's the one that's said to have introduced writing.
Introduce what?
Introduced writing. So you have that which doesn't need to be written, that which you know, because you are it. And you have being able to write it as a result of being connected to it. So these wisdom, understanding, principles are more or less in the spiritual decline of the Egyptian civilization, things that become turned into objects of worship and otherwise perverted to whatever extent. And so that same thing happens in the beginning of all religious entities or institutions. Jesus and Mary Mary gets cut out completely, and Jesus is turned into this thing that you worship.
Mm.
But you, in all true spiritual and reality-based practices, you will have the masculine and feminine. If it doesn't have that in there, something is wrong with it. And usually when you go, the further in time you go back, the more you see the influences of the feminine in all of them. Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, no exception.
I have a question then. Is that the law that Jesus said he came to fulfill?
Yes.
Because we thinking it's like what's written in the book.
Exactly.
But this is the law, right?
Yes.
That he come to fulfill. Okay.
The law that you can read for yourself directly from your connection to source.
Or you can know it.
That
know it
doesn't.
for yourself.
Yes.
Wisdom and connection.
That does not require writing. So in this, the negative use of writing would be the extreme legal speak of super complicated laws that apply to every little thing that you do in all your life or whatever.
Right.
That is the negative use of this as a result of the spiritual decline.
Like Torah.
Well, writing's not a bad thing, but I'm saying in the beginning there was just 10. Now there's like a bajillion, according to the Catholic Church. In the beginning, the 10 would have been this. That is the simple reflection of the intuitive awareness of natural spiritual law.
Yeah,
Simply put,
But
just-
it is the same thing in the Torah. The Leviticus and the Deuteronomy and all that, they're all laws.
yeah. And you can see that there's a ton of them. Which is why, and I actually have this, the Emerald Tablets of Hermes, Hermes is the Greek name for Tehuti or Thoth. The Emerald Tablets of Hermes, there's like, I forget how many there are. There might be actually be 10, which I wouldn't be surprised if that's where some of the 10 Commandments come from. But this is a short book. The Emerald Tablets is like 5 pages of this. The rest of it is people explaining. So, but anyway, I use that as an example because the truth is very simple. and you don't have to attempt to try to intellectualize what you're doing in every situation in order to know what to do. So these same principles are present in every spiritual source of a religious setting. And the same thing happens. Eventually, as distance and time increase, the original understanding of these things declines. And it becomes this, as opposed to 5 pages. Now in Kabbalah, there's supposedly a book called the Book of Adam, which may or may not actually be a physical book. And they say it's the shortest book. It's like 1 page of. Generally speaking, the shorter the book, the more powerful it is. But the more you have to be connected to your own spirit to even be able to draw from it. Which is why also coming out of Kabbalah, the Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of formation, is also very short. Not long at all. And these things would have been written down earlier or around the time of something like the Torah being actually physically written down.
I was just wondering if you could, in a simplistic sense, say, when you make a decision, when you're talking about an action, let's even say you're making a law or you're a politician or something, if you ask yourself those 3 questions, does this bring harmony? Does this further justice? You got rid of the third one.
Balance.
Does it promote
I
balance?
obviously had memorized. Okay. And does this bring balance? And if it's no, or gets congested and difficult to rationalize, something's off center, something's not right.
Yep.
Justice might be the tricky one. People make that more complicated.
Yeah, and that's really only because we lack the awareness that we used to have. You can know when someone is lying to you, because lying comes with an entire intention of consciousness that you can see if you are able to.
Well, it actually changes your...
It changes your physiology. It
Yeah.
changes you physically. Like, you use different muscles get activated when you are.
No, that's right. So if you can read it,
Yeah.
you can see.
And it extends further than that. Like, you can become aware of those slight adjustments of the face, but you can become aware of the mental impulse that produced it in the first place, and it just keeps going.
And that's when you make the face.
That's when you'd be like, I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
And that's why you can't hide anything from someone who is in tune with who they are. You cannot. There's no deceiving Yeshua or Mary. You don't even understand how that works. There's nothing you can hide from the thing that exists behind all those things already. Like, no.
Well, that's
polite enough
scripture.
not to say so.
Yeah, in which case I recognize your unwillingness to be rude and appreciate, and I won't say anything either.
Well, in that scripture, there's nothing you can hide, period, because it's going to be revealed eventually anyway.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I
Because
don't know what scripture.
I know we want
yeah.
to talk about all hidden things will be revealed,
That.
whichever ones. And that's because as we reawaken to our own spirituality, all those things that need to stay hidden if they want to keep existing, all those negative things that we don't think about because we have too many distractions. When we reawaken to our own spirituality and become aware of them again, they begin to fall apart. Which is exactly why Donald Trump is the creator. Because the first step is becoming aware of the extent to which this negative stuff penetrates. Then you can begin to.
So are we giving him balance like we had desired that we do?
So hopefully, yeah, we are in some way balancing out the negative response to what he's doing. So he's throwing everything into chaos. There has to be a counterbalance to that chaos. And that carries us on to being able to remove that negative effect. If there was no counterbalance, then that chaos would win and we would destroy ourselves. And eventually in 1,000,000 years it would start over again or something.
I just think you need to think past
That's what we are doing.
because Congress is happy to have him be the clown in charge. You need to pay attention to what's happening in the Congress. Donald's not doing anything.
At a local level.
He's just making a lot, well, all politics is local is something we've been very slow to realize because it means it takes an effort and we're just lazy.
Okay.
So,
Yeah, it is. It's all right here. If you got South Carolina going on the right track, you don't think that would change everything?
Can I mention something too? Because now they're trying to keep, they were saying something about Nikki Haley. She need to watch what she say because
You made a joke about how she was replaceable.
No, because the thing about outshining Trump, it's in his personality that you want to be close to him in a way, but if you're smart, you realize you don't want to be too close to him, because sooner or later, what does he do with everybody who's close to him? Unless he stays on top, they go. So that's what they're saying about here. She's starting to look too good. I don't know if I file that, but she's not thinking of anything that she's saying. She's just saying what she's been told to say. But that's the kind of narcissistic, neurotic personality you're talking about in Trump. And when you're running a family business, who cares, right? This ain't supposed to be a family business. Sorry.
yeah. I think it's weird that Nikki Haley was chosen at all.
I think it's very.
No, I think Audrey's right. It's to move her out of the way for McMaster, who had an obligation to Trump and all that sort of stuff. So she was just the pawn on the chessboard, and she's got to be careful, because if she suddenly starts to act like she's more than that, that's what that they're saying comes from. That's not her role yet. Even if 10 years from now, yeah, could she be the nominee for president? Why not?
You are the only participant in the conference. Please press any key on your keypad to remain in
Oh,
conference.
sorry.
Anyway,
I was
so-
gonna hang it up.
Oh, yeah, well, I don't know.
So yeah, I mean, think back to Roman emperors, or, heads rolled in the neck, or anybody in power structures, and very Machiavellian kind of stuff.
Trump not smart enough for Machiavelli.
No, but it doesn't mean he can't do Machiavellian-like things just instinctively
Oh,
due to
yeah.
his character.
Yeah, no.
He's not thinking it out, he's impulsively acting it out.
Yeah.
That he is doing.
But I care more about Ryan and what's his silly face in the Senate in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Those are the guys who are part of a more insidious package, I think. But hey,
I keep hoping he'll stumble into something great for everybody, like universal healthcare.
He just might.
you want Pence to be president?
No, not stupid stumble and get fired, but stupid stumble into something wonderful for all of us, like
Oh.
universal healthcare.
Oh, he's still capable of doing something wonderful. If he perceives that the other thing is just not going to make him look great, that's why the fact that he isn't glued to anything could be helpful, but it's,
Rolling dice.
rolling the dice, yeah.
Trump.
You know what Pence would do?
So, sorry. In the
All religion is politics.
all politics,
All politics is religion.
an extension of religion.
Yeah.
Because if you want to, the minds of the people is what you seek to influence, and that as soon as you start talking about mind, you start talking about spirituality. So I am mostly finished, but I want to just throw a few examples in there. So in the beginning of every cycle of time, we have a very high spiritual level. And if you think about that in the context of Christianity, you have Yeshua and Mary, and the beginning of what eventually became Christianity. Over time, the spiritual awareness and general level of consciousness declines. So So at the beginning of the Egyptian cycle, you had neters and spiritual principles, and eventually over the time that became things to be worshipped. Just like in Christianity, Jesus became the thing that you worship. Mary was cut out and Catholicism rose. But at the beginning of all of those cycles, and the beginning of that decline of spiritual awareness, there are always students and people who attempt to stop that from happening, or at least mitigate the potential disaster, any potential disaster that can take place as a result of us falling out of our awareness. So the origin of the ritual and the sort of text that religions use comes out of an attempt to remind people of where they once were. So it's not necessarily negative, or it isn't negative that this was written down. It gets used for whatever. But in the beginning of its creation, in the beginning of the creation of any symbols or ritualistic practices associated with religion, was the attempt to remind people of where they came from. Those rituals and practices then became co-opted and used negatively. But at their inception, more often than not, they were positive things designed, just classroom materials to help you learn. In the case of Egypt, by the time these things called the neters were worshipped as deities, that was the beginning of the height of the religion. So the true spiritual awareness had already been in decline. So the Egypt we think of as thousands and thousands of years ago, that's the end product of something that had been going on for a while. Which the Great Pyramid is a reminder of a time of much greater understanding. And I want to use the word pyramid because it connects directly to this thing in the origins of this thing we call Christianity. But, oh, not to the left. I might have talked about this in here at some point, but pyramid and the general stone structures, extremely ancient stone structures, standing stones that you see in virtually all parts of the world, including Southern Africa, come from this sort of time when people were beginning on a global scale to fall in decline. And the things that they created were the tools that they would use to help them remember where they came from and to reawaken that same degree or level or state of awareness that they once occupied naturally without any effort. So you have pyramids, you have standing stones. Stonehenge is a really good example, but there are ones much more ancient than that. The point is, all of those things are spiritual tools. Now, we look at them today, and through our sort of religious, conventional thinking, misinterpret the purpose of these things. We assume they were used in the same sort of religious way that we would use, I don't know, like a gold candlestick or something. The empty ritual that is part of much of religion today is not what these things were for. Or at least ritual that is greatly divorced from its original spiritual purpose, which is shifting and changing consciousness, is generally what we see today. In ancient times, these things were directly associated with shifts and changes in consciousness. So, another good example is something called a dolmen. And if you've never seen a dolmen, it's basically an arrangement of stones, usually pretty small in relation to something like a pyramid. But they're found in Europe and other places, of course. But it's like big enough for maybe like one or two people to be sitting inside. But they serve a similar purpose. pyramid is probably the penultimate example of the same principle in work at work. But my point was, so this is an attempt to stop the decline of spirituality in the beginning. An attempt to reawaken people using the tools that students and adepts in whatever tradition created, that were eventually lost, forgotten, co-opted, whatever. But as I said, pyramid in particular has significance with relationship to Christianity because this word and the name Yeshua are related. So, or however it's spelled in English, let me write it in Hebrew. Pyramid is sort of two words. Pyr is the prefix meaning fire, as in pyro. And amid is amidst, amongst, or within. And when you look at the name Yeshua, you have the shin, which is fire, in the middle of Yahweh. So the physical structure of something like a pyramid is designed to recreate the spiritual reality of what this name means. Just in a more ancient time than even before the development of this written language. Maybe. The mission that the person that we call Yeshua was here to do along with his wife was the same mission as the physical structure of the pyramid. Was to massively catapult the speed at which you developed spiritually.
Just being inside of one, or understanding it, or?
For the pyramid, it would be being inside it. So yes, so the pyramid has all those chambers and stuff in it, but for some reason no way to get in, because in the initiation, the systems of initiation into the mystery schools that were present in that part of the world, they would, after a certain degree of learning that you had demonstrated, they would take you into the pyramid, and you had to go through it yourself. And yes?
So then is pyramid the practical application of Teheti?
Of Tehuti?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a good example. Because if you think of Tehuti as science and understanding, the pyramid is science merged with the intuitive spiritual awareness, and an attempting to fuse those two for spiritual purposes. So this is spiritual technology. So yes, they would take the initiates or of whatever level through the pyramid, and they would, because of what the pyramid is and the way that it vibrates, it would vibrate in resonance with them. So you go in there and meditate, and that's what that quote-unquote coffin is in there for. So if you've ever seen in the, I forget which area of the pyramid, it's the king's chamber, the queen's chamber, but there's a coffin, quote-unquote, that has no lid. There was no lid, it's not a coffin. That's what they assumed it was when the Europeans first described it or whatever. But it's something that you lie in, and then essentially you're in a very high vibratory state, meditative state, and then the structure of the pyramid amplifies it. And just as I said, massively accelerates your ability to evolve yourself spiritually, which is the same mission of Yeshua and Mary, to reawaken you to what you actually are. So you can't go in here unless you are able to even use it. You would either have a negative experience or nothing.
Freak out.
Yeah, you would freak out. Same thing with the dolmens, whatever standing stone structure. All has to do with vibration and the way that consciousness works in terms of frequency and vibration. But I use that as an example of how the original spiritual application of this obviously fell into decline. That thing it still has an effect. It's nowhere near as great as it once was. It might even still be able to be used. But see, when they were in the pyramid, they moved that coffin. The thing that you're supposed to lie in the meditative state was aligned with the structure of the thing, and they moved it when they were in there. So everything about this is as destroyed as they could destroy it.
Wow.
Is that where some of the curses and things came from? Like it's just basically children somewhere they didn't really belong. This, you know what I mean? Like the myth of the curses
From like
from
the
moving things around and
Yeah.
you know these sort of bad things that would happen in digs and stuff like that.
Yeah, I do believe that. And aside from the just physical traps they would lay, because they would use physical traps as well to keep you from stealing stuff. But yes, when you mess with stuff like that, you do something to the spiritual atmosphere. And there's even all this is related to the real sort of degree to which we were spiritually aware of what is going on, including the story of Aladdin and the genie. There's associated with the oral tradition and the legends concerning Mary, that's in Jesus Mary.
Mm-hmm.
One of her disciples came up to her with a pot that they found, and the pot had been used in like a sealing ritual to seal a particular spirit in it, and she said, "Don't break it, because if you break it, you'll let it out." So stuff like that. All that is related into
Wow.
not only what we have the ability to do spiritually, but in terms of the true history of these types of tools and technologies. So when Aladdin rubs the lamp, it's the same thing. Like when you find the physical symbol that has symbolically, ritualistically sealed away a particular spiritual vibration, is the direction that's going in. But definitely wanted to connect those two. The geometrical and the symbolic language associated with Egypt and even Hebrew itself are all remnants of the height of spiritual awareness in their respective parts of the world, and their similar parts of the world actually. But over time, as the number of people forget that they are the thing they are seeking and they look to something outside of themselves, the level of spirituality declines and religion takes off.
But what's inescapable from that is then it's a cycle that we can't seem to escape from. So on the one hand, at least in this life, so on the one hand you have, which is why you had a lot of, at least I know them from Asia, very esoteric Tibetan Buddhism. Didn't want to join the other forms that were becoming more popular because they wanted to keep a certain pristine and a truth. And people were killed if they tried to expand knowledge because they knew that there wasn't any way to avoid that corruption. So we seem to be stuck in this cycle where all we can do is repeat it. And as individuals, hope that we're in an age where, through whatever effort, we can at least ourselves attain some escape from that by attaining whatever you want to say, an adequate level or truth. You know what I'm trying to say? But in terms of, this is why we use terms like the human condition, maybe, that's what this life is going to be. That's getting a little closer to a Buddhist notion that this life doesn't perfect itself, it's always going to be destroying and creating, destroying and creating. The question is whether you can escape from that, your being, your essence, whatever, by connection to the truth. But that's its function.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what's going on around you, kind of. I mean,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I see what and it is like the cycle. We go through cycles like that because there's always a continuous opportunity to
But
learn
we
from the
have this
the
notion
circumstance.
of modernization, of progress, which fly in the face of that. They tell you, no, we can put all that in the past. And hence we tell ourselves that in our new mythologies. That pyramid was back then, they only had it so right, they understood it this way, but we see better. When maybe the truth is, no. By the time it's, and then you get into the French word, which I like, the French definition of the word vulgarization doesn't mean the way we use the word vulgar, it means commonize, popularize, commonize. But there's a cheapness that comes with that. You cheapen the quality and understanding. So that's part of the cycle, right? Because more and more people are being told about it who don't have that understanding. So what could they do but cheapen it, right? So but maybe at the end of the day it doesn't matter, because if at the end of the day it's really your journey,
Yeah.
get on with your journey.
So in the Hindu system, there's the Yuga cycle, which is basically a description of the same thing. Over time, people start at a very high spiritual level, and then over time it begins to decline until it reaches the low point. But they also say that the low point is the best point to live in, because the opportunity and the ability to flip it and catapult yourself into a state of spiritual awareness is much greater at the low point, if you know how to use the adversarial experience.
Isn't that the wilderness that church calls?
Yeah, that's part of it, because you believe what you thought was true, but that only is the doorway to something greater. In a way, yeah. And the Yuga cycle is talking about this sort of overall decline of spirituality as well. So in amidst chaos, that's where the greatest of heroes arises, type of thing. And the hero is you, if you know how to relate to that chaos.
And that's what we're doing now, learning, right?
Yeah.
How to maneuver through it.
Mhm. And learning how to rise above its influence in ourselves. And we have to do it because it's oppressing.
But tying those two things together, if you're thinking of it as like some sort of continuum from really nuts to not so bad, closer to when the pyramids were pyramids, you don't know where you are in that, but if you're in the middle of that evolution, so to speak, or devolution, it might be harder because there's much more that's attractive. If you're at the bottom when everything is so bad, then maybe you're saying it's easier to just see the good. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's, you know how when
Not that you can
when
pick
you have,
the time, but that you're there when you're there.
yeah,
Unless you've been there 10 times before and you just keep, you gotta get it right
Get
this
it
time,
right.
because this is it, Jack.
right.
But then at the end of the day, if it's all love, you'll get it. Just may take 100 more worlds. I don't know.
Hopefully not. But
Well, Buddhism basically says it, but it also says that we're on what, the 4th or 5th Buddha? Cycle of Buddhas. It's not Buddha, it's cycle of Buddhas. So there's still time.
Yeah.
well, they're referring to those, because in every era of history, there arise those beings who attempt to remind you where you come from.
But otherwise, this is what, the third law, second law of thermodynamics? Basically everything comes apart. Which law is that?
I
That's
don't know.
pretty bad. Huh?
That's the,
Whichever, well, no, I could.
Murphy's Law?
that's the,
No, it's not
no,
Murphy's Law. It's the law of thermodynamics
you're talking about entropy.
yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
So we can't avoid that, but this is the time you have to do what you can do. And the more you can recognize what that is that's going on around you, maybe, the more you can separate yourself from it to find your own truth. If you can't separate yourself from it, then you're wait till the next life, because you're not going to know, right?
So, I think I will finish with that. So, for everybody on the phone, wait, the phone is off. Yeah, I think I will leave it there. But if you have any questions or anything, feel free. But I will end my official thing here.
Thank you.
Yeah. And it could be related to anything, doesn't matter.
When you were talking about cycle of time,
Mhm.
how do we know we're entering into another cycle of time? When spirituality rises again?
Mhm. If we make it, but we will. And because we're dealing with it on a global scale now, the potential for destruction is global, not just our corner of the world where we are. So yes, but that is what we've been saying in here, that is happening. The only reason Trump is in place is because that is happening. The only reason all these things are being revealed so quickly is because that is happening. Nobody thought Trump was going to be elected. Nobody. Not even him. Least of all him. Trump was not part of the plan.
So much of our, not only our physical stuff, but the concept that we had in our minds are being dismantled because of what we blatantly see and hear every day. And deteriorating that, it is giving lots of people pause to wonder, well, what else is there? There has to be